Welcome back. China's top military general accused of leaking Beijing's nuclear weapons secrets to the United States, allegedly accepting bribes for official acts. The general, considered Xi Jinping's most trusted military ally. This reportedly is part of a larger aggressive dismantling of China's military leadership, as Xi Jinping supposedly is cracking down on corruption and disloyalty. Some experts questioning whether this is impacting China's military readiness. Joining me now is Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, great to see you. You know, this is a story that you and I have touched on over the years, but I'm wondering what you think about this now. Because if Xi Jinping has been weakened, which we know that he has since having that mini stroke years ago, why is he taking out, why is his lead military guy being taken out? Is that his decision or the Politburo's decision? What are your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I think that General Zhang Yaoshao, who was the #1 uniformed officer, first vice chairman of the Communist Party Central Military Commission, was Xi Jinping's adversary in the military. And I think Zhang was actually taking out Xi Jinping's loyalists in the military, which he did last year. What we do know, and there's a lot we don't, but what we do know is that the Communist Party right now is in turmoil. And the military is not that ready because the senior leadership has been annihilated, as someone said. I don't actually think that Zhang Yaoshao passed nuclear weapons secrets to the U.S., but I think that clearly right now we are in a state of turmoil in China and anything can happen.
Oh, so you think that was made up, that they said that he passed secrets to the United States, but that was just a way to take him down?
That's my guess, because when you think about it, Zhang really didn't have that many ways of contacting the U.S. and passing along technical data. You know, anything is possible, Maria, but I think that this is an allegation that was made to justify General Zhang's arrest. Now, right now, we're going to find out a lot more as time progresses, but at this point, we don't know that.
Now, we know that there's the Davidson window where Admiral Davidson had issued an expectation that China would go into Taiwan and try to take over by 2027 or in 2027. Is that still your expectation, or do you have new thoughts about a weakened military in China right now?
I was never a big fan of the Davidson window because I think there were a lot of internal reasons why China would not invade Taiwan even before this recent series of arrests. But this recent series of arrests means that the top leadership of the Chinese military is now gone. And I don't know how you can launch a combined air, land, sea operation in such a state. But this doesn't mean that we are free from war and threat of war, because Xi Jinping has a lot of incentive, more incentive now, to keep tensions high. And if he miscalculates and one of these incidents goes wrong, he can't de-escalate. So I still think the risk of war is high, but not for the reason that Admiral Davidson thought.
All right, let me move on to Canada, because President Trump issued a stark warning to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney over Canada's new trade deal with China, threatening 100% tariffs on Ottawa if something is signed. Now, I was in Davos, and Carney gave a speech in Davos, and it very much tried to undermine the president and the United States. So the president writes on Truth Social, if Governor Carney thinks that he's going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. Gordon, what is your reaction to this deal that Carney is doing with China?
Well, first of all, this deal is not good for Canada from a number of different perspectives. But the problem here for Carney is that in 2024, which is the last year for which we have full trade data, Canada ran a $62.0 billion trade surplus against the United States. Last year, it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $45 billion. But Canada's still in the surplus. Now, we run a services surplus against Canada, but overall trade surplus, they are in the good and we're in the bad. So that is going to be the defining factor. Canada needs the United States. We don't need Canada as much. I do think, though, that President Trump should tone down the rhetoric, because we do need good relations with Ottawa, because we have that long undefended border, and we do not need an Ottawa that is more aligned with Beijing than it is with Washington. And that is the state right now. So we've got a serious problem that we got to deal with.
Well, Liz Peek, jump in. I'm not sure if you saw Carney's speech, Liz, but when he was talking in Davos, he was talking about getting tough against the United States. He used the phrase, take the sign down. In other words, don't make believe we don't know what's happening. And it was a big talker in Davos. The president knew his customer, recognized that he knows that he's got to do a trade deal with the United States, and they're doing bilaterals now. It's no longer USMCA, where Canada and Mexico will be in the same deal. Canada will have its own separate deal with the United States.
So, Gordon, it seems to me that one of the more aggressive things from Carney's speech was the idea that China was going to be invited to bring EVs into Canada. The reason that's aggressive is America, the United States, has really defended itself against cheap, well-made EVs that could swamp our market. So how do you interpret this? I mean, was this just sort of an insulting thing to do? As you mentioned, we are very intertwined with Canada in terms of production and in particular in the auto trade. So how do you read this?
Well, certainly we are intertwined. You have all sorts of American manufacturers are in Canada, in Ontario. And those production lines are integrated. The EVs, President Biden in January 2025 prohibited the import of Chinese EVs into our country because they're rolling spy machines. If Canada is going to allow 49,000 of them into Canada in the first year, I hope the Trump administration goes through with its threat and prevents Canadians from driving them across the border, because we should not be allowing a surveillance of American roads by China through the back door. In other words, through Canada. So I hope the president goes forward and makes that clear to Carney.
We should point out the obvious, and that is that, China is weakening, Canada is weakening, and the president is empowering the United States, building up the military, building up shipbuilding, getting supply chains back here. The Department of War releasing America's National Defense Strategy for 2026, striking a new tone on China as the U.S. puts focus on defense efforts closer to home. The Pentagon writes this: the Department of War will seek and open a wider range of military-to-military communications with the People's Liberation Army, with a focus on supporting strategic stability with Beijing, as well as de-confliction and de-escalation more generally. Our goal is simple: to prevent anyone, including China, from being able to dominate U.S. or our allies. The president is still pushing for a deal to acquire Greenland, warning of Chinese influence in the Arctic, a mechanism, the Golden Dome, to stop any potential missiles coming from China at any point, or Russia. Gordon, your reaction?
Well, first of all, it's nice to say that we're going to try to have a stable relationship with China. But the point is, China's political system is in turmoil. And I don't know how you have any sort of relationship with a regime like that. So China is going to make itself a priority, regardless of what we say in our strategy documents. China is going to provoke us, and it is going to become the top priority. So this is nice that we say this, but it doesn't take into account the reality of what's occurring in East Asia right now. And yes, it's good that we have that Greenland Framework Agreement. That's a real start to the defense of the American homeland, and indeed all of North America.
Very important. The president walked us through that last week in that interview from Davos. Gordon, thank you so much. Good to see you. Gordon Chang. Stay with us. We'll be right back.